Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Conservative Cool Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley, here on the weekly news segment. And I want to thank everyone that's joining me this evening. We have a real special guest, someone that I hope that's going to spark some debate and also get people to really thinking about the whole pro-life, pro-choice debate. Her name is Rebecca Kiessling. She has an amazing story about her journey in life and how her life began and where she's come to now. It's going to be a very, hopefully we get her on the air here very soon. It's going to be a very deep story about the choices that we make here. And you know, to be honest, I've always considered myself someone that's pro-life, but I've always given the door open to someone if they were raped through rape or incest, that you would want that person to have a choice. And Rebecca has definitely a different perspective on that. And again, I hope people are listening in tonight so they can really absorb it, because it's a very deep story, and it's something, again, that I think a lot of people, even pro-life people that say, "Oh, I'm pro-life," but in cases of rape or an incest, then I'm pro-choice. And I think that's where I think a lot of people are like that, and I'm not criticizing that stance either way. But the more I've talked to people, a lot of these candidates over the last couple months, and I'll ask them, "Are you pro-life?" You know, the ones that say they're pro-life, I'll ask them, "Are you pro-life even in cases of rape and incest?" And they still say they're pro-life. So we do have people out here that feel that way. And again, Rebecca adds a totally different spin to that and a totally different perspective. So without any further ado, I believe Rebecca's on the line.
Hi.
Caller, you're on the air.
Hi.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Hi, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. We just went on the air, and I was kind of explaining to people a little bit about your background. Now that you're on the air with us here, can you kind of give everyone that's listening in, your history? Because it's an amazing story, and I really think that people need to hear this.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was adopted and searched for my birth mother at 18, and that's when I first learned that I was conceived when she was raped.
Okay.
And then I met her, and then that's when she filled me in on the horrible details. It was, one of those worst-case scenarios. I mean, she was abducted and, brutally raped by a serial rapist. And that's how I was conceived.
Wow. And so before that time, you didn't know any of this history. Through your adopted parents, did you assume that those were your? Did they ever tell you were adopted or anything like that?
Oh yeah, they told me when I was really young. In fact, I really didn't understand the concept. They told me I was chosen. So
okay.
I sort of thought like it was like the whole notion of the stork. Like my parents called up God and placed an order for me. And then they just picked me up. I didn't really understand that I had been, like, in a mother's womb. That didn't come until a bit later.
Right. Now you said at 18 you started to do the research, and when you found out, how did you feel when you found out about the way, that you were adopted, and then obviously you found out more about the situation? How did you feel at that time?
Oh, I was devastated. I mean, I really just felt like garbage. And basically that's because of people who would say that my life was like garbage, that I was disposable. And, I wondered, okay, what does this mean about who I am? Do I have like these rapist genes in me? And then, of course, I thought about the issue of abortion, and I felt very much targeted and devalued by our society. I felt very alone, and I felt like I was in a position where I was now going to have to justify my own existence.
Wow.
That I'd have to prove to everyone that I shouldn't have been aborted and that I was worthy of living.
Wow. Now, at such a young age, what was that? That had to have been a very big challenge.
Yeah, and my parents really didn't give me any kind of foundation for dealing with that truth. I was adopted and raised in a Jewish household, but it was very secular. God was irrelevant in our household. I never saw my parents pray. And my adoption story was like a lot of others, that, oh, your birth mother loved you so much that she chose adoption. And, my parents told me, too, that they had tried and tried for years and years and couldn't get pregnant. And so then they chose to adopt. And so I had already felt like I was second best, last resort. Like, why would you want to adopt if you don't have to? And I had just really wanted to hear that my birth mother had wanted to keep me, but she just couldn't afford to, and that it was some sad story. And so it totally burst my bubble. I was hoping that I would find my value, identity, and purpose out of
now,
it.
how did you go about researching this, and how did you get that information? Because I know a lot of times they go through a lot to protect and provide that kind of privacy for the person that's, giving away the child for adoption.
Yeah. Well, this is in Michigan, and the law was changed in 1980 to form a central registry, so that if you were adopted after 1980, you just turn 18 and you get your information. You get it all, unless she put something on file specifically that she doesn't want it released. But if you were adopted before 1980, like me, I was 1969,
okay.
And you turn 18, all you can do is petition for your non-identifying information. And, that's what I got. And that's basically where I figured out that I was conceived in rape. And I called my caseworker and asked her. And she said, yeah, I didn't want to tell you. It had all kinds of details about my birth mother. But for my biological father, it just said that he was Caucasian and of large build. And now, of course, that sounds like a police description. But then the law was changed in the mid-1990s to allow for what's called a confidential intermediary, where a judge would allow someone to try to contact the birth mother and see if she wants to meet. Well, I actually had a judge allow that in 1988 for my caseworker to do that before the law even provided for it. So I was kind of like a trailblazer in that regard, and my birth mother wanted to meet me.
Okay. That's something else I wanted to kind of talk to you about. Now, we got to the point where you started to do the research. Can you kind of give people, after you found out, what was the next step and what were some of the things that you did? Because again, the story doesn't stop there. So let's go from there to once you started getting that research. What did you do next?
Well, we had to fill out all kinds of paperwork and still send it into the central registry and wait till they verified that we were a match. And then I finally received a letter that had my birth name, which was Judy Ann Miracle. So I was a miracle baby, which I thought was pretty cool. And then it had my birth mother's name and her phone number at the very bottom of the letter. And trembling, I called her up. I was attending college out of state at the time, so this is, long distance. It's not like I could just call her and okay, let's go see each other.
Okay.
But she said that she was sorry to hear that I already knew. So my caseworker had told her that I knew. Yet she still went on to fill me in on some horrific details that, again, I was totally unequipped to hear. And it was, as I said, a worst-case scenario. She weighed 90 pounds. She was only 4'10". She's really tiny. And she was heading to the grocery store at night right down the street from her home. The guy jumped out of the bushes with a knife, abducted her, and she basically went on to describe for me in graphic detail how he brutally raped her.
Wow.
And that was, of course, very difficult to hear.
Right. And how long ago was this? What year? What time frame are we talking about at this point?
I was conceived basically in October 1968.
Wow.
She said it was as she recalls, it was the night that the Tigers won the pennant, because there was toilet paper all in the trees from people celebrating. Which it was also something they would do Devil's Night, so I don't know, but Yeah, that's what she told me. And then I was born in July 22nd, 1969. So abortion was illegal in Michigan at the time.
Right.
And actually, even right before Roe v. Wade, there had been a measure, a Proposal B on the ballot 2 months before Roe v. Wade was decided. And the voters of Michigan overwhelmingly voted that they do not want abortion legalized in Michigan. The trial date in Roe v. Wade was actually on my first birth date, and the U.S. Supreme Court decision was exactly 3.5 years to my birth date. So I knew that abortion was illegal, but as I said, having felt targeted and devalued, I still wanted to ask my birth mother about it because I wanted to hear that I was safe. I wanted to hear that she really did want me and that abortion wasn't an issue. You know, I kind of just wanted to put that behind me so that all of those horrible things that I hear people say about, you know, in case it's a rape, that they wouldn't apply to me. And even though she was thrilled to meet me and sent me a beautiful letter, when I asked her about abortion, she told me that if it had been legal, she would have aborted me. And in fact, she went to 2 back alley abortionists, and I was almost aborted. But
she's telling you this, so I know that's got to hurt.
Yeah, I mean, she told me because I asked, you know.
Wow.
And she told me by phone. You know, this is after our initial reunion weekend meeting. It was 22 years.
Now I want people to hear that because I followed you on Facebook and I was watching some of the posts. You guys, when did you guys have your reunion?
October 28th, and so that's coming up, and it'll be 22 years. It was on her birthday that we first met in person, and it was an amazing reunion. It was wonderful. She had a huge family reunion set up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she's always been so proud of me, and I've always called her Mom from the time we met because I just felt like it was honoring to her and nurturing to me.
Right.
But then she told me that truth, that awful truth. And I said to her, you don't mean if you had to do it all over again, right? And she said, no. And I said, what about everything you said in the letter? Not reason enough of having to give up something as beautiful as you were? What about when you told me that you were sick 2 years ago, that the only thing that kept you going was the hope that someday you'd be able to meet me? And she said, you don't know what it was like, which is absolutely true.
Right.
But today she's okay. And despite the utter horror of her saying that to me, I still chose to nurture a relationship with her, honor her for the role that she did play in my life, and I just thought that if I was good enough, that she'd change her mind. And she did change her mind 6 years later. Although I no longer needed to hear that for my own well-being, that was a time in my life where I finally knew my worth.
Right.
And now today, I still honor her. When I got married, she was walked down the aisle at our wedding as one of the mothers. And due to circumstances in my adoptive family, which I won't get into that now, but I've basically been forsaken by my adoptive father. My adoptive father, and my mother is so drugged up on bipolar medication she doesn't talk. But I mean, we never really bonded. It was a rather abusive childhood, although we had some good years. But at any rate, my birth mother and her husband are legally adopting me.
Wow.
And it's going to be finalized next week on her birthday.
Wow, that you know what? And I'll be honest with you. When I've done my research and I was reading on the website, your story is made me. I've been discussing this with my wife before I, came on the air with you, and that is a tough situation to be put in. But your story is enough to convince a lot of people to change their minds and their theories. Because I've always considered myself someone that was, pro-life, but like I said, reading your website, people say I'm pro-life, but in cases of rape or incest, then it gets fuzzy.
Somebody told me
your situation really changes the way someone would look at that.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I do have people regularly tell me that I changed their mind about the rape exception, that they had always made that exception because they thought that was a compassionate thing to do. And they had never, I hear this all the time, never put a face to the issue, never heard it from the perspective of someone like me.
Right.
And someone just told me this evening that they heard Glenn Beck on the radio today on his program say that he supports abortion in cases of rape and incest. Like, oh, man, that stinks.
And I guess that's the question I would have for you, or someone. If someone proposed that to you, do you have kids?
Do I? I have 5 children.
5 children. Okay. Now that's I guess the face I've always put to it is I have 2 daughters myself, and I've always and that was the one thing I was like, well, if that happened to them, how would I how would I feel? And my wife said clearly to me that, well, the Lord never puts anything in front of us that we can't handle. And is that kind of like where you would if someone asked you that personally, in a way where, well, how would you feel if that was your daughter or your sister or someone like that? How would you feel? How would you feel on that stance? That would not change, right?
Right. And as an attorney, I've been a guardian ad litem representing the best interests of a 12-year-old mother, who had a baby, and she had been raped. And I've had all those kinds of cases. I've seen it. I've walked into their house and sat down with them, and let me tell you, a baby is not the worst thing that could ever happen to a rape victim. An abortion is. And if you really care about rape victims, you would want to protect them from the abortion and not the baby. A baby is not the scary enemy. And I don't care what Rachel Maddow says and other people say. First of all, I am not the rapist baby.
Right.
Because that's what they say. Oh, you're don't you think it's extreme to force a rape victim to have to carry the rapist baby? I'm not the rapist baby. And that is very offensive to rape victims who choose life, which is the overwhelming majority. There's only 15 to 25% choose abortion, which is actually half the rate of your average crisis pregnancy, which I think is very telling. And most of them choose to parent their child. And the whole rhetoric actually prejudices them because the notion is that we have to make abortion legal because of rape victims. They shouldn't have to have that horrible reminder of the rape.
Right.
And, that they would be traumatized by the baby. That is the assumption. And if you look further into that assumption, it's also that a real rape victim couldn't possibly love her baby. And so that casts doubt on the stories of rape victims who choose to mother. One of the gals who's done speaking with me, and I have a link to this on my website, her name is Shauna Pruitt. I met her when I spoke at Georgetown Law School where she was attending. She's now an attorney, and she wrote a very critical piece on this. And she went to law school because of what happened to her. She was raped when she was in college, and the rapist lawyer found out that there was DNA evidence because there was a baby, and found out, her home state, and sued her for custody. And she found out she was unprotected. Only 17 states have any provisions for the protection of rape victims to have the termination of parental rights of rapists. And out of the 17, only one makes it mandatory The rest say a judge may terminate parental rights, totally discretionary, when it should be mandatory. And it also requires a rape conviction. In most of these cases, they're pled down. Only 1% ever see the rapist convicted as charged for a rape. And so some pro-choice people would hear that and say, oh, well, you see, this is why we got to have abortion legal. It's like, you don't understand. These women want to have their child. Just like with the issue of domestic violence, the number one victim of domestic violence is pregnant women. And so the pro-choice camp will say, see, that's why we're going to have abortion legal. They're totally missing the point. They're the number one victim of domestic violence because they want the baby. And abortion exploits them. And instead of being a right to an abortion, it's become an expectation to abort.
Right. Now that's kind of like where I look at it, like in society now. This always has this quick fix, and that's not the solution.
Yeah. And then of course it's personally insulting to someone like me when people say, oh, don't you think it's a bit extreme to force a rape victim to carry the rapist baby? And it's like, I think it's extreme to tell another human being that they're garbage, that they don't deserve to be living, that they weren't worthy of protection. They're the ones who are the extremists. My goodness. Right.
And again, you have a very unique perspective of that. And again, I think that's what could change a lot of people, their mind about this, is because, like you said, putting a name and a face to it, and again, seeing your situation the way it's turned out, that would change a lot of people's minds. Where are some of the places that, telling your story, where is it taking you as far as your journey over the last, 5 to 10 years of places that you've gone and, tried to help people out?
Well, almost every state in the United States, I think, except for, like Utah, Oregon, and Alaska. Oh, and I haven't spoken in Hawaii yet. But, all over the U.S., Canada, Mexico, Scotland, Ireland. And then my story is translated in, numerous languages, and it's posted on websites around the world. Because other people need to be encouraged now to hear these stories, to speak out. Because, for years I felt like I was the only one. Nobody else was speaking out. And then I started hearing about Pam Stenzel. She's a famous abstinence speaker, and she was conceived in rape. And then Julie Mackeyma. And now there are, on my website, I have dozens of life-affirming stories of other people who were conceived in rape and incest, and links to more on the web. And I've organized events where 8 of us spoke together at the UN and throughout New York City. I had 12 of us in the Detroit area who spoke together and were filmed together. And I have a page dedicated to stories of rape survivors who became pregnant out of rape and either regret aborting or are sad that they, had a miscarriage, or they had a forced abortion, or they're raising their child, or they placed that child for adoption. And they're all life-affirming stories from people who love life and want to speak out against abortion. So I don't want it to be, just my story, but there is a multitude of stories, a mountain of evidence that every life has value. And, not everybody has a happy ending like mine. Where my birth mother's adopting me. I mean, there are others who were utterly forsaken by their birth mothers, who said horrible things to them. But
that's something I wanted to ask you about. Do you have any, could you understand how the mothers, or potentially how they could feel towards seeing that child at this point, or any, empathy for them as being rape victims, and they didn't, maybe they didn't want to do it, and they, obviously had the child, but they might still have, ill feelings towards the child?
Yeah, first of all, that is more rare, but adoptions used to be very different.
Okay.
Many times the birth mother didn't even have a choice. Her family just said, this is what's going to happen. You have to place this child for adoption. And they also, and, they were told you'll never be able to see this child again. And so they, detached when they were young. And nowadays, the birth mothers are given the opportunity to pick families. And so I know so many birth mothers who, again, that I've met, and I get emails every week from people all over the country and around the world who are currently pregnant by rape, or just found out they were conceived in rape, or they're raising a child who was conceived in rape. And things are just so different because they have more, ownership of the adoption if they choose adoption, and they get to pick the family. And it's just such a different scenario. And they get to see these pictures of their baby growing up, and it's not like all of a sudden, 30 years later there's this like huge person who's knocking on your door. You see this baby smiling and growing over the years, and I think it's just a very different experience now.
Do you do counseling with any of these young girls, or like where do you go to pregnancy centers and things like that to speak to these girls that might be considering getting an abortion in a scenario like that?
Well, in my law practice, before I closed my law practice 10 and a half years ago to, be a full-time mom and homeschool. And as I said, I have 5 children. The first 2 are adopted. And we have an open adoption, too. And our son was conceived at a rave party. And, a rave party, very similar situation.
Okay.
Yeah, and then she went on to get involved with a guy, and they were doing heroin, and she tested positive 4 times during the pregnancy, in jail, pregnant on heroin. Easy target. And he was taken away at 2 months old. Reports were that his biological father had tried to drown him. And he went into foster care and facing trial. They consented to us adopting him. But now we have a great relationship with her. She's doing really well. She's been clean for many, many years, and she's turned her heart back over to Christ, and she now wants to be a pro-life speaker because she's been devastated that she's had coworkers and friends who have aborted, and she wants to talk to young people and say adoption is so much better.
Right.
Because she can see these boys, and at least she doesn't have abortion to add to the list of her regrets in life, but she can know that she did something good, and they honor her. So,
I can hear in your voice. I can hear in your voice the passion, and it touches you. How much has your faith played a part in this journey that you've taken?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, when I speak on university campuses, I give a secular presentation because I know what it's like. I mean, I spent many years lost.
Right.
And I know what the attitude is on campuses, and many times they'll just quickly dismiss you and tune you suggest that you have any kind of faith. But, ultimately, I mean, there are really no words any person could say to me that are going to heal me. They're going to make up for it all. What are they going to say? Get over it. No big deal. Life's what you make out of it. I mean, I failed using that kind of approach. And, if the power's within me, then God help me, because I was a mess.
Right.
Ended up in an abusive relationship.
I was in college, too. I can relate.
Yeah, and basically, when I started to hear what God's Word had to say, it really spoke to the depths of my soul. There's no stigma being adopted. We're told that it's in the spirit of adoption that we're called to be God's children through Christ, not second best, last resort, only for the infernal, but God's first choice and meant for the body of Christ. We're told, it says, though my mother and father forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Like society's going to receive me. And a father to their fatherless is God is holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. I know that I was created in His image for a purpose. I'm His wonderful workmanship, created to do good works. My life was spared for a purpose. And I know I don't have to prove my worth to anyone because he paid an infinite price for my life.
Sure did.
So I was pretty valuable.
Sure, you sure are. And I was right here. Can you give people the website address? Because I'm looking at on the website. There's a DVD called "Conceived and Raped: From Worthless to Priceless," and this is your story. So if people want to know more about your story and obviously hear more about these, hear more different people speak on their experiences, what's the website they should go to?
It's www.RebeccaKiessling.com, but if you can't remember how to spell my name, you can just Google pro-life speaker, and it's the first site that comes up. Or you can Google conceived and rape, and it'll be the first site to come up. And there's also videos that are right there on my website that you can watch or share with others of me speaking or being interviewed. EWTN has a nice interview there. The DVD is a 90-minute DVD, so it goes in depth into my whole experience, what I say to other people, my experience in law school, and all of the high-profile cases I handled as a family law attorney. Like the frozen embryo case in Michigan, I represented the mother. And 2 cases involved rape and abortion, one involving a 12-year-old who had been raped by her brother and she was 7 months pregnant. A woman who was sued for not aborting for breach of contract. They were all national, international news. And so I kind of talk more in depth about those, and also even about our daughter Cassie, our second adopted child, who was born with special needs and ultimately died in our arms at 33 days old. She was precious. It was an honor to take care of her. So, and I also talk about infertility and pro-life infertility doctors and just all that kind of stuff. It's much more in-depth than the other videos on my site.
I can tell you just by talking to you and listening to all things, God definitely put you here for a reason. Again, you before I even had this interview, I was really doing some research and really thinking about it because, again, I've always considered myself someone that was pro-life, but I always made that exception myself. But really, like I said, really looking at your story and again, talking it over with people, you're changing people's minds the way they look at that and the way they think of that. So, I mean, the work you're doing is special and definitely you can't put it's something that people need to hear.
Thanks. Well, I tell people that when you say you're pro-life with those exceptions, or when you say you're pro-choice, it's like saying, I think your mother should have been able to abort you, which is like saying, if I had my way, you'd be dead right now.
Right.
And,
that's the connection people need to have to understand.
And that's not very compassionate. I mean, I'm a woman. You say you care about women. Well, it doesn't sound like you care about me.
Right. And again, when I'm listening to people like Rachel Maddow, I remember I think I was watching that about a week ago. All my listeners, I'm not embarrassed. I do watch MSNBC just to know they're thinking. That they were actually condemning people for feeling that way because they consider that radical, that people did not believe in abortion in situations of rape or an incest. And again, if you're listening to them, they can frame it in a way that makes it sound pretty awful. But again, talking to someone like yourself really puts a stronger perspective on that.
Well, there's one other thing, and that's, people, pro-life people who think that, okay, strategy-wise, you have to make this exception. Politically minded people probably listen to your program and they think, well, it's politically expedient. You got to make this exception or you're not going to get things done. And, let's save the 99 in exchange for the 1%, right? Which, first of all, it always reminds me of, the story of the 99 sheep. And Jesus went after the one. I mean, he was all about the one, But the big thing that people need to realize is in Roe v. Wade, the opinion of the court, footnote 54, the justice pointed out the fact that Texas had exceptions in its law, and that the fact that it had exceptions undermined their entire argument for personhood, for protecting unborn children, that unborn children have a right to life, and that they cannot have that right to life deprived without due process of law, and that they're entitled to equal protection. Because they had exceptions, it undermines the whole argument. And you see, when all aren't protected, none are protected. You think you're saving the 99 by throwing the one under the bus, and in the end, everyone's at risk. You're not saving anybody.
Right. Wow. I mean, like I said, I'm glad. I'm really honored that you've come on my show tonight to talk about this, because again, it really does make me, and I hope all my listeners out there are listening. If you want to call in, the call-in number is 347-996-3175. I'm not going to keep Rebecca on the phone too long here, but if you have any questions, you can call in 347-996-3175, because, again, this story right here will make you think twice about your position and how you deal with, being if you're pro-life. Even, like I said, a lot of pro-life people always try to slide that in as their safeguard. And I think especially politically, like you said, politically inclined people, they want to stay politically correct, so they use that as their disclaimer, even as being pro-life. And again, in your story will make people really examine that from that position, because again, people don't really associate a name or a face with it, and you're doing a great job of that.
Thanks, and I am so excited that there are more high-profile candidates than ever who are 100% pro-life.
Yes, indeed. Like I said, I was talking with the Attorney General candidate. I'm not calling the Attorney General already, but Bill Schuette, and he made that distinction quite clear between him and the candidate that's running, that he's pro-life 100%. And again, I think before a lot of candidates might have been in between on that, but you are it's obviously making a difference, because we have candidates that feel that way.
Mhm. And we have 5 candidates for U.S. Senate who are 100% pro-life, and that's what Rachel Maddow was lamenting.
Right. And who are those 5 candidates, just in case people are listening out there?
Oh, no, I shouldn't have brought it up. Now you're going to make me name them all?
I know Joe Miller's one of them. But...
Okay, well, so is Sharon Angle is one of them. And, yeah...
I think we got a call here. I think they might bail us both out here. We got a call here. Let me go ahead and take this call. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm calling from Boston, Massachusetts. I want to thank you for having Rebecca Kiessling on your show. And I wanted to just ask Rebecca, have you encountered any people who are saying that they are strongly pro-life and who are really against your message, and how are you able then to deal with that, with people who say that they are pro-life, but even after hearing your message, or maybe you haven't encountered that?
Well, like there's a candidate here who used to be endorsed by Right to Life in Michigan. He is Dale Kildee. He's the 5th Congressional District in Michigan. He's a Democrat, and he used to be endorsed by Right to Life, and he had said that he was pro-life except in cases of rape, and as it turns out, he had a lot of anti-life votes in U.S. Congress. He's been there 34 years now, and thankfully we have a 100% pro-life Republican candidate who's running against him. But I remember meeting him perhaps a dozen years ago, and it was actually in the town where I was conceived. It was in Livonia at a prayer breakfast, a pro-life prayer breakfast, and I went up to him to introduce myself and to share my story with him and to challenge him on that. And he, to me, he had the audacity to lecture me on why it was necessary for him to sacrifice the lives of children like me. And why basically I need to get with a program and understand that. And I am not suicidal. I value my life. I mean, I would have to be suicidal to get to the point where I would say something like that. But as I said, it's not even politically expedient. And then I get frustrated with groups like National Right to Life because they regularly allow for exceptions and even celebrated the Stupak Amendment. Now, they were telling people the Stupak Amendment was pro-life.
Right.
And that, how wonderful it was because it didn't have any funding of abortion. Well, that was a lie. It did fund abortions. It funded it in cases of rape and incest, which is so much worse than saying to someone like me, I think your mother should have been able to abort you. It's taking it so much further because it's saying, and our tax dollars should have paid for it. Ouch. And you call yourself pro-life? You have got to be kidding me. You're going to celebrate that? And then when it was disclosed that, it funded, abortion for rape and incest, then they said, well, it was only incorporating the terms of the Hyde Amendment. Well, first of all, so what if a generation ago they made that mistake? It should have never happened. But also the Hyde Amendment was limited. I mean, that was like Medicaid funding of abortion and it involved Indians, Native Americans. But this takes it so much further. And all it would do is increase the rate of abortion in cases of rape. Because Planned Parenthood will just coach people on what to do because that's exactly what they do now. They're not going to miss out on all that funding. They're having difficulty keeping their doors open. Clinics have closed all over the place. There's half the clinics in Michigan today that there used to be. So I get frustrated with those situations.
Oh.
Well, all right. Well, I didn't get your name. Called from Boston?
Yes, my name is Nalita.
Nalita. Well, thank you so much for calling in this evening. I hope you're enjoying the show, and I hope you continue to listen in.
I am, and God bless you, and God bless you, Rebecca, for your continued courage.
Thank you, Nalita.
And your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. You have a good evening, Nalita. I love that accent.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hello? Rebecca?
Yes.
Yes. Well, again, I think the same way she feels is like, thank you so much for sharing your story and everything you've been through because, I personally, it does make you look at things a lot differently in that kind of situation. So for everybody listening again, can you give your website address so they can go ahead and check that out? And if they want to get any more information, they can go to your website.
All right, it's www.RebeccaKiessling.com, and that's RebeccaKiess as in Sam, LING.com.
All right. Do you have a Twitter address or anything like that in case people, in the Twitter world want to follow you?
I do not have time to add another thing on my plate. Yeah, I do Facebook.
You got to get your Twitter address here. We're in an online world. We got to get your Twitter address. You probably would have over 100,000 followers in less than a couple months with your story. It's an amazing one.
Well, I have a Facebook. I have a Facebook page, but I'm at my 5,000 limit pretty much.
See?
But
I also that's exactly what happened.
I do have a Facebook fan page, too, though, and that's just Rebecca Kiessling, pro-life speaker. And so I post stuff there regularly. And I just posted another story to my website today, the story of Ashley Boyer. She became pregnant by rape. Actually, she was abducted off the streets of New York City. And someone had kind of set her up for it. And she was alone there, and they tried to force her into basically this, sex industry, and she refused, and she was beaten, and then basically ended up pawned off to another pimp who, again, when she refused to participate, he raped her. And when he fell asleep at night, she got a cell phone, called for help, and was rescued. And then she was just first concerned about STDs. She really didn't think she could get pregnant because what she'd been told in the past. And then, a couple months went by and she wasn't feeling quite right. And she went for pregnancy test and was, absolutely devastated to learn she was pregnant. And, immediately started lamenting. But then within moments quickly turned around and realized, this is my child. And that's what I hear a lot of rape victims express, that at first, they're shocked and horrified, but then quickly they realize, this is my child, and this child's here for a purpose, and my job is to protect. And so, she has this awesome baby boy who is visiting us today. She lives near me, and she's done some speaking with us. And he is such a cool kid. And she's being provided for and helped by, God's people.
Right.
And her child is an absolute blessing. She says, her life is so much better now because she's making really good decisions about, where she goes and what she does and where she lives and who she's friends with, because it's not just about her anymore, but now she has this, awesome responsibility of taking care of a baby too. And she said her life is so much better for it now, and he's really helped save her life. And so that's pretty much what she wrote out in her story, but there's more detail to it, of course. And now she takes him to pray in front of abortion clinics with her, she says, so that she can they can go together to save his little baby friends.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And I just got somebody on the blog here that just wanted to say, they wanted to say thank you, Rebecca, for speaking for the unborn. I'm getting people sending stuff on my blog right now while we're online. So someone just thanked you, Team Player. That's his nickname. Wanted to thank you for speaking up for the unborn. I had someone else that wanted to know, did you go to Pontiac Northern? I guess you're pretty...
No, I did not. I went to Southfield Lathrop High School because, I am from the Detroit area.
Okay, yeah. Somebody just asked that question. So we got people thanking you. People were saying they really appreciate your strength and your confidence, and obviously, again, I'm not the only one that can appreciate this story and the way you can change people's thinking on this. So. Oh,
that is so nice. People say to me, like, how can you deal with it? Like, how can you deal with all the mean people and all the horrible things that they say? Because I kind of share what people say, when I go and speak. I share all the mean things that people say and what my response is to it. And they're like, oh, how can you deal with all that? Because especially when I go speak on university campuses. And I once heard that Albert Einstein had said that for every negative comment, it takes 3 positives to overcome it. And I think it's actually more like 100, because I know I can kind of stew on things.
You're definitely, from the support I'm seeing out here, you're definitely appreciated for what you do.
Yeah.
And you're going to I can say, me personally, you're going to motivate people to want to get more involved and speak up for the unborn with your story alone. And like I said, personally, it's pushing me to want to do more. So I really do appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story and sharing other people's stories too. Because again, like you said, it's not just you; it's other women that go through this, and the more know about it, the more people are educated, maybe the more they won't run to obviously just thinking that abortion is the only answer out here.
And people need to know that they're not alone. There's an online support group called stigmatized.org, or actually that website's defunct now, but there's still a Yahoo support group. It's called Stigma Book, and it's a private email group for people who were conceived in rape or incest or women who became pregnant by rape. And that's a worldwide group, and I've been very active for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's really wonderful. And I also started a private Facebook page for people who were conceived in rape or incest and women who became pregnant by rape. And I started it less than a year ago, and we already have 50 members. And it's wonderful because we're all mutual Facebook friends, and we're really, there for each other in many different ways and getting to know each other, and we get together and have done speaking together, many of us. And Some of them are across the sea in the UK, and it's great. They're out there doing that, speaking out in the UK, and it's wonderful that we're, hopefully we can encourage people worldwide so that these stories will get out there and we can, blanket the earth with these life-affirming stories. Because, there are a lot of people who are conceived in rape. And I have, on my website, I show there's an estimate like over 32,000 born every year. But people will always feel like they're the only ones. And we're not alone. It's just people need to be encouraged to speak out and to be connected in community so that they can have that courage.
You're a brave woman yourself, and again, like I said, this has been a pleasure having you on the show because again, it's such an important issue. And again, you're welcome to come on anytime. Like I said, it's been a very, very much a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure my listeners, it's going to motivate them because, again, it's motivating me myself to want to do more, to want to help speak up. Like I said, me being from Detroit, I know how it affects my community, and, again, it just makes me want to get more active in trying to speak up for the unborn.
Well, I hope that you'll have some of the other people whose stories are on my website as guests.
I'd like to do that. I definitely would like to do that.
And so you'll find that there is contact information for many of them where I can, set you up with them on Facebook, and I know that they'd be happy to share their stories too.
Definitely. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll shoot each other an email, and let's try to make that happen because, again, I think these stories are important and people need to hear them to make people think differently and to get people on the right track because too many people look for the easy out and too many people think there's only one alternative, and there's definitely, obviously, more choices than that.
Yep, and just get the word out, read those stories, and, have an answer prepared for people then, when they ask why you're 100% pro-life. You would be answer number one at this point, at least. Like I said, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll continue to promote the message. And again, I hope to have some more of the people on your website on my show. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Okay, God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, people, I hope you were listening to that story. That's an amazing woman, and her story is amazing. Again, I'm going to start talking more about these topics and bring them more to the forefront because I think we have to be honest with ourselves. Like I said, I've always, considered myself pro-life, and I always was willing to make that exception. And the more I thought about it, I guess during this election season, I've listened to people say, I'm 100% pro-life, and even in cases of rape and incest. And I said, whoa, even myself, I said, that's a pretty tough stance to take. But realizing now, even as a Christian, that those are the kind of things that, you do have to put in God's hands. God will not give you a situation that you can't handle. But hearing Rebecca's story, putting a name and a face to it really does, it makes me think differently about the situation. I hope that my listeners that are listening are doing the same thing. So, again, if you get a chance, go to Rebecca's website, check out all the different stories, and if you can, support, get the DVD. And, again, that's something that, again, gets the message out there, take it to your church. You can have her come speak at different events. You just go to the website and see if you can arrange something because her story really is something that can change people's lives. So, again, Rebecca, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you to Melita for calling in from Boston, from Massachusetts. Like I said, love the accent. People, you're encouraged to call in. If you have any questions or if you want to add anything to it, the call-in number is 347-996-3175. Again, that call-in number is 347-996-3175. This interview will also be posted on my website at conservativescool.com, so you'll be able to go on there and listen to it at any time. Again, this was an amazing story, and more people need to listen and spread that message because In a lot of places, people just think that there are no other alternatives, and people are quick to run to an abortion as the way to solve your problems when it actually could be opening the door to more. So, Rebecca, again, appreciate her coming on the show. Appreciate everybody calling in, is listening, making their comments on the chat in the chat room. We had a lot of different people, team players. No problem. You're welcome. Thank you for listening in. I appreciate it. All the people that are listening on the show. I'm heading into my year anniversary at November 17th, and again, I've kind of been tossing it around with people. We're going to change the name of the show to from the Conservatives Cool Talk Radio to possibly the Wayne Bradley Show, and we're going to talk more about not just politics. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about things that are affecting our community, because after this election, things that, unfortunately, I think that a lot of things are going to return to the norm if the right candidates aren't put in place. So it's important that we tackle all the issues that are affecting not only politics but our life, our lifestyles, our cultures, the direction this country is heading in, not only from a political standpoint but also from a moral standpoint. And I think that has a lot to do with where we're heading as a country in general. Our moral compass is definitely off, and we need people like Rebecca to help kind of remind us and keep us on the right track, because again, we kind of look at some of the things that the mainstream media puts out there, and people accept that as face value, and we have to stop doing that, and we have to start looking at all the consequences for these actions that people are doing. Obviously, someone raping someone is a wrong. But then it comes to the thing, is it two wrongs that are going to make it right, or is it going to be something that you have to have faith in God for to get into a better situation? So, again, I'll be tackling more issues coming up in this the next year. I want to thank everybody that's listened in to the show, that's made it so far, been a very successful and enjoyable experience. I've enjoyed talking to different candidates and people throughout the country, but today, it was one of my more rewarding and enjoyable experiences talking to someone, because I realized that person is making a difference in people's lives and the way people are thinking about things, including myself. So, again, that is the kind of people I want to bring on the show. That's the kind of thought-provoking material and questions I want to bring to the radio in this coming year. So, we'll be making some small adjustments to the show, after the year anniversary. But again, I want to thank everyone that's been supportive, listened in, retweets the messages, posted when I'm having shows, and we're going to have a real big fun bash on the year anniversary. I can't let you know everybody's coming on yet, but I will be replaying some of my favorite interviews over the last year, and it's going to be a real fun time. And again, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the people that listen in and give their support on this show. So, again, thank you. Go to the website, conservativescool.com. Listen to all my archived interviews. We have some comic relief in there. We've got all the most recent news. And, again, it's been a great ride, and we're going to keep moving forward. We only got 2 weeks left to this election. So let's make sure that we're putting in the right candidates wherever you live. I've tried to bring candidates throughout the country to come on the show, so we're at least aware of the quality of candidates that we have throughout the country. I suggest everyone do your research, really get to know the people that you're voting for, because and know their history, because a lot of times they'll tell you one thing and do something totally other. And the Republicans, I think they're learning in this election themselves that the Tea Party and the Tea Party movement is not going to be a direct extension of the Republican Party. That is more in line with independent conservative thinkers that want their elected leaders to get back to the basics of following the Constitution, smaller government, less spending, less taxation, and we're going to really, going forward in 2010 all the way to 2012, we're going to really push that and make sure that we have the right kind of candidates in place. So, again, thank you for everyone that's listened on the show. Thank you for Rebecca for coming on the show this night, Rebecca Kiessling. Make sure you go look at her website. You can Google her, find out all the information you can. And, again, pray for the people that are out here that have to make those tough decisions, that they'll make the right one. Because, again, it's very clear, obviously, and someone that's pro-life that's wrong. Choosing abortion, but you have to pray for people that they make the right decision and make and put themselves in the right position, because there are alternatives and choices out there. So thank you for everyone listening in this evening. Go to conservativescool.com and go to the polls and make your voice heard. Election. Let's clean up D.C. Everybody. Thank you. God bless you, and have a good night.